We're going to talk about just how severely the deck is stacked against victims of sexual abuse if their abusers happen to be members of Congress. Now, we've all seen this disturbing and, quite frankly, really creepy story about 88-year-old Michigan Democrat John Conyers and his years of sexually abusing women. It cost Conyers his post as the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. But this is a really pervasive problem. And I'm not going to get into the players. We know what John Conyers did. We know what Al Franken did. We know that Franken is going back to work, claiming to be, quote, embarrassed and ashamed. That from the New York Times. But let's talk about the system in place and how this system proactively and very aggressively works against the victims. Now, I've mentioned here on the show that I worked sex crimes cases both in law enforcement and afterwards in the private sector as a partner of groups like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I worked with the NYPD, the LAPD, the U.S. Marshal Service via NCMEC. That's the acronym for the National Center. And I learned quite a bit about sex crimes investigations, both crimes against children, crimes against adults. The prosecutorial and investigative processes are very, very similar. And when I read the way victims are treated when their abusers are members of the House or the Senate, well, it made my blood boil because the deck is stacked against them. The deck is severely stacked against them. And the Congress people, the swamp dwellers, are rallying around their own. They're circling the wagons and protecting these sexual abusers. This is terrible, terrible stuff. Now, luckily, there's some movement on this. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? So there's a big light shown on this now. And a couple of lawmakers, led by Representative Jackie Speier, a Democrat out of California, and Representative Barbara Comstock, a Republican out of Virginia. Now, Representative Comstock's name is important. I want you to remember that because she sits on the House Administration Committee, which is responsible on the House of Representatives side for paying out these settlements. And we're going to get into the settlements, the numbers, and the real numbers in just a few moments. They're pushing for legislation, again from the New York Times, that would, quote, require claims to be handled in public. In the Senate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, a Democrat, is pushing similar legislation. So this is good bipartisan legislation. This stuff should not be handled in the shadows. It certainly shouldn't. Now, one of the major questions is whether the Speier-Comstock legislation is going to apply retroactively. In other words, are we going to learn about all the past settlements, all of the past members of the House and Senate who have been accused of sexual misconduct, or is it only going to be exposed going forward? I believe it has to be retroactive. Your taxpayer dollars were spent. You have a right to know where they went, and you especially have a right to know where they went if they went to settle claims of misconduct from people who would then clearly be unfit to hold office. This is relevant information going into the 2018 midterms. Might be the most relevant information going into the 2018 midterms. It also goes on to say, so Rob Portman from Ohio said he would port retroactive releases, but others, including Representative Nancy Pelosi, the House Democratic leader, were more cautious, saying that unmasking, what is that word? Unmasking lawmakers could reveal the identity of victims who want to remain private. That is bunk. That is absolute nonsense. Law enforcement daily posts the photos of rapists, the photos of pedophiles on the sex offender registry without identifying the victims. So Nancy Pelosi is clearly trying to cover her own because Al Franken, a Democrat, and John Conyers, a Democrat, are right now the two most prominent sexual abusers in Congress. That's all Nancy Pelosi's doing. Now, another guy, Representative Jamie Raskin, remember his name, he also sits on the House Administration Committee, which pays out these settlements on the House of Reps side. Well, Jamie Raskin, a Maryland Democrat, who holds the recently created position of vice-ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, so he was an ally of John Conyers, praised Mr. Conyers for making a wise decision. Now, in fairness to Raskin, he went on and said, quote, the House is ready to clean house with respect to sexual harassment, and everybody agrees that we need to have a zero-tolerance policy. Well, or do they? Or do they? Because Nancy Pelosi, the ranking Democrat in the House, the former Speaker of the House, refuses to call for John Conyers' resignation. In fact, she called John Conyers, quote, an icon in our country, and said, quote, he has done a great deal to protect women. Nancy Pelosi is now a parody of herself. Does she even realize how ridiculously embarrassing she sounds, how she's making a fool of herself? And New York Representative Kathleen Rice, a Democrat, called for Conyers' resignation. So kudos to Representative Rice. She's putting the safety of women before party, unlike Nancy Pelosi. Representative Gregory Meeks of Queens said that Conyers should have given up his perch as the Judiciary Committee's ranking member a day before he did it. So, kudos to these Democrats. But Nancy Pelosi, the woman becomes more disgraceful by the day. And remember, Nancy Pelosi said that Conyers is an icon in our country and he's done a great deal to protect women. Well, Cokie Roberts, NPR's Cokie Roberts, who was with ABC for a long time, who is no friend of conservatives, said that the female press corps, the women in the press corps, congressional press corps, covered up congressional sexual misconduct for years. Cokie Roberts said, quote, we all talked about it for years. Don't get in the elevator with him, And every female in the press corps knew that, right? Don't get in the elevator with him. Seems to be referring to Conyers. She was on ABC's This Week, and they were talking about Conyers, and she said that in the context of a discussion about Conyers. Now, think about that. Every woman in the congressional press corps knew not to get in an elevator with John Conyers or you'd get groped. But Nancy Pelosi and Jamie Raskin, Democrats, are claiming they knew nothing about this. They know nothing. They know nothing that went on. And now it's about zero tolerance. Do these people think we're idiots? We know the answer. They do. Congress has become rulers. They become rulers when they're supposed to be representatives. They're supposed to represent us, not reign over us. They've really lost sight of that. That's why we need to vote all of these establishment people out. Now, Politico did a really good piece decoding. It's actually called Congress's Sexual Harassment System Decoded. So the conventional number that you keep hearing is $17 million in public money paid since 1997 to settle workplace disputes on Capitol Hill. Not all of that money has gone to the sexual misconduct allegations. Not all of it has. And there really isn't a tally on just how much has. But it wouldn't matter anyway, and here's why. Because in Conyers' case, he did pay a settlement to a woman who accused him of sexual misconduct. She worked for him. But, quote, the money came out of Conyers' office budget, meaning it wasn't even included in that $17 million total. So how many more members have quietly settled these cases? Now, what's even worse is that like I told you, the Committee on House Administration is the one that approves and pays these settlements. Now, this is an important little paragraph here. I want to read it to you. Politico asks a question. The question is, who knows when a lawmaker or aide settles a harassment claim? The answer is, quote, the identities of lawmakers or their aides who reach misconduct settlements aren't disclosed, effectively meaning there's no warning system for other potential victims. Now, this is exactly what the Spire Comstock bill is trying to eradicate, is trying to prevent. But let's dig into how bad that is. Let's think about this for a second. In the real world, if you face civil claims and then subsequently criminal claims, or criminal first, then civil, and you lose in the criminal case, you're a registered sex offender. Your name is on 1,000 websites, your picture's on 1,000 websites, and your neighbors get alerts on their cell phone when you move into the neighborhood. The whole world gets to know you're coming because of your sexual abuse toward an innocent. But not if you're a member of Congress. If you're a member of Congress, you're allowed to quietly settle this claim. You're allowed to do it before criminal charges come, and your victim is given a very rigid non-disclosure agreement. Everything is done in secrecy, and the most important sentence there was, there's no warning, partial sentence, quote, there's no warning system for other potential victims. That is exactly why we created sex offender registries, so that people would know if the violent rapist lives down the street, if the pedophile lives next door, but not in Congress. In Congress, the policy is to cover up for these people, and it's done at the committee level. We do not live in a system where everyone is equal. People elected to office, people appointed to office are given special treatment. We saw it with Hillary Clinton, and we're seeing it again with members of Congress, many of whom should probably have been criminally prosecuted for their sexual abuse. This really, really gets me fired up. Now, who's on this committee? Well, the ranking members of the House Administration Committee decide if the settlements are paid or not. And their names are Greg Harper, a Republican from Mississippi, and Robert Brady, a Democrat from Pennsylvania. Harper's in Mississippi's 3rd Congressional District, Brady in Pennsylvania's 1st. But Barbara Comstock and Jamie Raskin are also on that committee. Barbara Comstock, a Republican from Virginia's 10th Congressional District, is sponsoring the bill with Jackie Speier, like I told you earlier, to bring this into the light. Jamie Raskin, the Maryland Democrat, he says he wants zero tolerance, but it sure doesn't seem like he's pushing legislation for it. So this is a serious, serious problem. And your money is being spent to cover this up. Now, a couple of more quotes here from Politico. They say, well, we discussed already, who in Congress approves settlements paid with taxpayer money? Now, we talked about this at the House Administration Committee. I just read you who the members are. There's no such, now this is important, because that's only on the House side. Quote, there is no such similar process in the Senate, according to Gene Manning, who set up the upper chamber's chief counsel for employment office in 1993 and remained in that post until 2014. This from the same Politico piece. She said, quote, I don't understand why they do that, meaning the House Administration Committee having a panel that approves the settlements. She said, quote, she would be concerned that it could become political. Each side of the aisle could have a political reason for not approving a settlement. If a case isn't settled, it could proceed to a public lawsuit. And think about what she's saying. This was a lawyer for the Senate who's far less concerned about victims than she is about having one person paid by the United States Senate whose job it is to approve settlements to cover up the sexual misconduct of senators. You see, when we use the term deep state, it's not conspiratorial. It's not a group of old white men around a table smoking cigars in a dimly lit star chamber room, planning things in the world as part of a sub-government. No, it's nothing that nefarious or conspiratorial. It's a lawyer who held a job for 1993 to 2014. She held that job for 21 years. She held that job for 21 years, and her main mission was to cover up scandals for congresspeople. She was their lawyer, and she wants that to be the policy, that the lawyer paid for by the senators is the one determining whether or not the allegation should go public and other victims should be warned. They think that cover-ups are just business as usual. Just let them happen. Now, 2 more people who are completely useless in all this, and actually 4 people, right, are Nancy Pelosi, who we spoke about, the ranking Dem on the House side, Chuck Schumer, the ranking Dem on the Senate side, Mitch McConnell, the useless Senate Majority Leader, and Paul Ryan, the absolutely useless Republican Speaker of the House. Now, we're going to end this by me telling you just how restrictive the non-disclosures are for the victims. From the same Politico piece, the Compliance Office says, now once the House Administration Committee approves the settlement, Compliance Office pays it, that, quote, there is no restriction on whom you can tell about pursuing a harassment claim, but victims are subjected to confidentiality requirements during their mandatory counseling and mediation periods. An aide who might want to speak out about their harassment claim, including talking to their employer, can ask to waive confidentiality during counseling, but it doesn't necessarily have to be approved. The mediation process, however, remains subject to strict secrecy rules, including the use of non-disclosure agreements that bind victims from talking. The trappings of confidentiality, they permeate the process. This is from Alexis Roniker, an attorney who has represented the victims. And she says something that I think is absolutely spot on. She says, quote, the law is written to create a system to disincentivize staffers from coming forward. In other words, your allegations, if you're sexually abused by a member of Congress, these elite rulers, this ruling class, you're sexually abused by one of them, if you're victimized, the system is set up to essentially silence you, protect them, let them go on doing this in the shadows, and you can never speak about it or warn anybody. That isn't a broken system. That is a system that never should have been. That is a system whose foundations were cracked from day one. And that is a system that needs to be burned to the ground today. I want to keep bringing you this really, really important content. So please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. This stuff is really important. And when you think about it, per day, it's basically a cup of coffee or a beer. So you really do want to subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber, thanks very, very much. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.